Hey everyone, I'm Kevin. Today in the Victory 4x4 Garage, we're going to be installing our Blitz front bumper on our Lexus GX 550. So we'll start off with a teardown here. We're basically going to be working to remove this entire front fascia assembly and kind of this grille section and everything from the vehicle. It's mostly just small screws and clips. You just kind of got to know where they are so you don't damage anything along the way. We'll start off by removing this cover up top. So these clips are kind of spread all along this top cover, but they all come out the same way. You're just going to press in on the center and then lift up, and those will pop out. Make sure you save those to reinstall later. Once you have them all out, this thing pops off super easy. So if it's hung up anywhere, you probably just missed a clip. No worries there, we'll just set this off to the side now. From there, there's 3 screws up top here that we've now exposed that need to be removed using a 10mm socket. Then coming down underneath the vehicle, you've got quite a few fasteners under here. We're going to start in the center. This is kind of a aluminum bash plate right here. There's 6 10mm hex head screws right on here. 2 of them are kind of tucked up in the back. Those are typically going to be hidden by your factory skid plate if yours is equipped with that, so that'll have to come down as well. Obviously ours is already off on this vehicle, but those are either going to be a 10mm or 12mm socket that you'll need for that. So you can get that out of the way and then come up to this step. And of course, just make sure you support this in some way before you pull the last screw. Again, with your 10, the 2 innermost screws remaining right here can be removed. And really, once you get those out, you can see that this drops down pretty easily. It'll all then come off with the fascia. You could separate this as well. There's a clip and a couple more screws here that'll allow you to take this back metal piece off and kind of get that out of the way, so you just have less stuff to work with in here and less things to maneuver around brackets when taking it off, but not critical. That part's up to you. Then not necessarily required to get the fascia off, but you're already right here, so you can grab a 17mm socket and get both of these factory recovery hooks off. Out on each end of that center section, there's going to be 2 more screws, and once you remove these, this thing's going to be free to fall down. We're not going to reuse it, so don't worry about letting it hang. You're not going to damage it, so you can go do the other side, and then this will be discarded. Next, to remove these little kind of flaps or air dams, the front has a twist style clip, so you just rotate that 90 degrees and it'll drop out of its hole location. The back's going to have a pop out style clip, so you're going to need ideally a flat screwdriver or a small pry tool to get in here. You can pop the center out, and then that entire fastener should be able to be removed, allowing this to drop out. You also have 2 tabs under here that extend back from this fascia and mount to a metal bracket in there. Again, with your 10, remove the screws supporting those and make sure that those are free. Moving out to the corner, you've got fasteners in 4 of the 5 recessed holes out here. So these 3 are hex head screws, again with your 10mm, and then this one right here is one of those center pop style clips, so we'll grab our screwdriver for that. So with one hand on there while you pop this clip, you should be able to pull the whole thing down like that and get it out of the way. That'll expose 3 more screws right here that we'll remove. And that'll kind of start to free this up from the fender liner in here as well. Moving up to the side, kind of in this wheel opening now, you've got several clips that need to be removed. There's 4 along this inside edge that you can just use your screwdriver for, and then there is 1 button head screw up in here that you want to be sure to get out before you go pulling on this fender flare, because that will break pretty easily. If not, that you'll need a 4mm hex. So we can pop all of those free. With enough fasteners removed, we want to get this front section of the wheel liner kind of separated from the fascia and hanging a little bit loose under here. So pulling out on this and back on the liner, we should be able to do that. So that's kind of all we need to do there, and then we're going to be looking on both sides of the vehicle for any connections that need to be unplugged in here. So you've got at least one, looks like a camera cable right here. That should just be a thumb press style tab. And then you can separate that. The next thing up here is the hose for the washer sprayer. So it's got a thumb press style tab once again, but if you just disconnect that, it's just going to empty that reservoir and kind of pour that out all over the ground or the floor if you don't have something ready to drain it into. Alternatively, you can carefully pinch that very lightly with a set of vice grips or something possibly without damaging the hose short term, or what I'm going to try and do is just plug that line once I get it disconnected. So even my little plug was leaking a little bit there, so I wound up electrical taping it. Bottom line, you got to do something to prevent that from just leaking all over and making a mess. You can then get up behind here, and we're going to be working to separate at least the front of this fender flare, kind of pulling it out. There's 2 tabs in here that extend through the fascia, and they have a small locking tab on them that you're going to have to press forward to allow those to come out. And if you get that pressed properly, it slides out really easy. So if you're having to fight that for any reason, you probably need to look in there a little closer and figure out what's going on. It is going to stop about there because it then has more retaining fasteners tucked in beside or behind here the rest of the way up. Basically what we want to do is pop about half of those so that this can just hang and allow us to pull the fascia out and forward off of the vehicle. So those, as long as you get close to them, should pop out pretty easily. Now this is far enough out to do what we need to do here, so no worries there, but I was kind of fighting the next clip back underneath here inside of the wheel liner area, so we probably could have removed that as well and made that just a little bit easier. In behind this flare, up where the fascia meets the fender, you do have one more clip that has to be removed before we can pull this out. So same deal there, the center pop style clip, and we'll get that out of the way. We can then separate the fascia from its retainer here, as well as kind of out underneath the headlight by pulling straight out here, and then it's going to want to go forward a little bit as well. And we'll do the same thing over on the other side. Now across the center up front there are, it looked like 4 retainers. Basically if you just pull straight out, you can get those to pop pretty easily. If not, they're just a tab you're gonna have to reach down in here and press down on, but they come out pretty easily. And then coming back up top where we removed the 3 screws earlier, we're gonna need to just lift up on those tabs a little bit because those kind of lock in to their locations, and then this whole fascia will be ready to kind of fall off the front of here. So we set that fascia off to the side. We'll do a little more disassembly up here on the vehicle now. So starting right here in the center, we're gonna remove at least kind of this crumple zone section of this plastic for now. It's got 3 more screws across the top, so grab your 10 mil and pop those out. And after that, it's just got some clips so you can pull straight forward and pop those free and get this out of the way. Next, we'll remove this cover by simply grabbing top and bottom and pulling straight forward, exposing this aluminum crash bar. All of the bolt head sizes for the crash bar are going to be 17 millimeter. You've got 2 up top per side that you're going to have to get with a wrench since you have a bunch of stuff in the way up above it right here. But you do have enough space under there to get those bolts removed by hand. And then coming pretty much straight down from where you removed those, you've got 2 more kind of running front to back here, again per side, that we'll remove, making sure we're supporting this at this time. And then we'll grab a hold of this and it should just drop out of here. That crash bar does kind of rest on an alignment pin or stud right here, so it does have to kind of come forward just before it can drop, so just keep that in mind. With the fascia out of the way, I can also show you the electrical connector over here on the passenger side. So this one you do have to press in or pull in on a center style tab, and then this gray section is actually a lever that's going to rotate to release that plug. You can only actually rotate it back and lock it in when the 2 plugs are going together, so I can't actually do that at this time. Now, working from the inside of the fascia here, essentially we're just removing this lower section. So there's a series of clips all the way along kind of from end to end that we'll remove, as well as just 1 screw on each end out there where it ties into the factory fog light. So the screw is just the one you see here. It requires a 10 mil socket to be removed. You may have to contend with this wire harness and either pull it out here or just flex this tab out of the way temporarily. And then same thing over on the other side, there is a wire harness connection there as well. Then as for the clips, it's just going to be all of these white clips that run again from end to end inside of here. You just need to press down on the tab and then slide these out of their slot. You can grab a hold of that end usually pretty easily, and then just work along here getting all of these removed. So once you get all 12 of those removed, there are still some black retainers or clips, if you will, that slide through from bottom to top. Those typically you can just grab a hold and pull to separate. You may have to get in behind a couple of them with your screwdriver as well. But generally speaking, like I said, you can just pull on those to free them up and get this entire lower section removed. And once removed, kind of flipping it around here, this is a better look at it from the outside, so you can kind of see what you're taking apart there. And that then leaves you with this section of the fascia that can now be reinstalled on the vehicle using, of course, all the original factory hardware and all the original locations. So once you have the fascia hung back on the front of the vehicle, you can move to assembling the front bumper. That's going to be your winch, your lights, your trim plates, such as the one I have here. So this is just the front logo trim plate. It's going to go right over this light bar cutout. And this will install using 4 black 1/4-20 button heads with flange nuts on the inside. It's just a matter of lining this up over the front and then loosely installing all 4 of those bolts. And with all 4 loosely installed, you can then go back and tighten those up with a 5/32 hex. Then flipping things around, we do have 2 slotted mounting tabs inside of here for a 20-inch single row light bar. These are spaced approximately 22 inches apart, so keep that in mind for reference. Depending on the bar that you go with, you may have to kind of change out their hardware and add some small spacers or washers like we're using here to get everything to fit right. And then we'll just slot this down in here and tighten it up using that manufacturer's hardware. With those 2 things out of the way, we can now get our winch mounted in here. We give you a nice winch mounting plate down here at the bottom with slotted holes from front to rear, and then you'll just have to reach through the recessed holes along the bottom to install that hardware. So the one you're seeing here for reference is a worn VR Evo 8S that we had laying around the shop, but obviously this winch mounting base will accept a multitude of other winches. This is just the one we had and we're using. Admittedly, we've had this up on the truck once already, kind of as a test fit, and know that this is going to fit in here great with the solenoid
in this factory location. Now, while we're still on the topic of the winch and we kind of flip this thing around, you'll see throughout the remainder of this install that we've got a recessed fair lead mount location underneath the front. I just want to point out the Factor 55 that we're going to be installing here and kind of how this is more of a slim and smooth top and bottom profile versus one of the worn fair leads I found here in the shop. Not to pick on them directly, but this one has kind of this bump out on the top, and that one is going to cause you some clearance issues, specifically when installing it in this bumper with that fair lead mount. So pay attention when you're buying a winch, see if the one they provide is something like that, and just know that you may have to source something like what I have here. Just due to accessibility of that fair lead mount with where I have the bumper sitting right now, I'm just gonna wait and get that installed once this thing is hanging up here on the truck. Now, real quick, jump into the vehicle before we slip this bumper up into place. I kind of want to just run down hardware with you while this mount and everything is exposed, and you can see where all this stuff is going to go, since we're going to be reaching our hand in some somewhat tight quarters, at least to be able to show it with the camera to get some of this installed. So the kind of first and easiest hardware is going to be factory hardware going back in down here, the 2 bolts that would have held in your factory tow hook or recovery hook in this location. Then you're going to have 2 more factory bolts in the bottom of this front face here on the frame mount. Then moving up, you have 2 kind of horizontally slotted holes in this mount there. We're going to use 1/2-inch hex head bolts with washers in each of those locations. So these, of course, are going to pass through the bumper into this mount as well, but then you have flange nuts to go on the back side. These 2 slotted holes can be just a little bit tight on these, so you might want to just check that by hand first. You may have to just lightly clearance that out with a 1/2-inch drill bit to make sure everything goes in nice and easy. And then the 2 on the outsides, on the top of the mount here, you've got the same 1/2-inch hex head hardware combination, so washer and nut, that'll run from the bottom up like you see here. And then obviously just kind of the mirror image of that over on the other side. So that's just kind of a full hardware rundown there. From here, you can start raising the bumper into position. So we've just got ours on our transmission jack here. You can use a floor jack or just a couple friends in your driveway, depending on how you're going to be installing this. You always want to pay close attention to all your wiring as you're lifting this thing up, as well as really anything that comes into close contact with this. You've got some hoses back in behind there. We've got our winch wires, light wires, and everything that we need to start guiding up kind of the correct direction to get them up under the hood where we're going to get power for those, and then just slowly kind of get this thing up in place, aligning the mounts here on the bumper with the mounts on the frame. Once you've got this thing kind of lined up and close to its final position, you can reach underneath, and kind of the easiest thing to start is going to be the bottom factory hardware with just a little bit of manipulation up here, and then you'll need your 17, if you remember from your disassembly, to run those at least most of the way in. That, along with the alignment pin that sticks out of those front mounts, will kind of help support this thing so that we can get our jack out of here and move on to the remaining hardware. From this point on, you do want to kind of pay close attention to the side-to-side adjustment of the bumper, since you're going to start tightening some hardware. These bottom bolts can be used to kind of draw this up to help align some of the bolts on the front face if necessary. But you can see here now, you've got plenty of room through this cutout to reach in and get all that hardware installed. But again, it's just a little difficult to see on camera, which is why we kind of wanted to show it to you earlier on. So get your factory bolts installed down here in the bottom, easy enough. With that factory hardware in, once again, you can install that 1/2-inch hardware. You will have to reach both around the back here and then potentially kind of up over the top to get those nuts in place. Once you have all that hardware started loosely on both sides, again, kind of take a step back, make sure everything looks nice and centered on the bumper to the vehicle, and then you can start tightening this up. So again, it's your 17 on that factory stuff, and then you'll switch to a 3/4 for the provided 1/2-inch hardware. You can get in here with a powered ratchet like this or an air ratchet. That works kind of best for these front bolts. We might have to add an extension to this and then come up like that for the top bolts, but this is all pretty doable with pretty standard tools. With that hardware tight, you can cover it up with the gray side accent plates. These are going to install with black 5/16 button heads and flanged nuts. You can start by installing the one in this top front corner, and then you'll basically slide that in to this forward hole. You can kind of pivot that down and reach through to install the nut. And with it hanging there, you'll have to kind of lift it up, and then through the cutouts here, you can feed the nuts in, get them lined up, and install the remaining bolts. With all of those started, you'll need a 3/16 hex to work your way around and tighten them up, and then of course repeat that process on the other side. From there, now with a little bit better access to it, we'll install our fair lead and winch hook. Then to kind of wrap things up, as you come around here to your fender liners, obviously you'll have to do this on both sides. You can see here that ours is going to look a little different than yours. This one's already been trimmed once to fit that earlier version of the bumper that I referenced once already. So same concept really applies. Basically, you're going to push this tight to the front of the bumper. You're going to follow this line along as you trim, and then basically just follow this same thing down. So you will wind up with a little more material here toward the inside. The inside's really easy. You kind of just fold that under, and that's where more material helps, because it'll just tuck up on top of this top face a little better. This side, we give you a slot that you're going to wind up bolting through. Basically, you'll have to kind of force tuck this up inside of here, get the inside where you want it. This isn't super critical just yet. You're basically just going to need to get this in here where you can make a mark. Now, I was having a little trouble with my marker. It didn't want to reach all the way through there. Not a big deal. I just grabbed a drill with a 1/4" drill bit. I'm going to basically just use the slotted hole as a guide and reach through here and drill a 1/4" hole right into that plastic fender liner. At the very least, you could at least get a drill mark on it and then pull it back out to drill the hole. We are going to kind of do that anyway, because we're going to be installing a clip nut on here. In order for that clip nut to slide on, we're going to open this up just a little more. Make sure your fingers aren't behind where you're drilling, obviously. So I've just got a step bit here. That's just going to give a little compliance when sliding this on. If you haven't used these before, you'll just press this straight up from the bottom and line it up with the now drilled hole. And then you can tuck all of this back in, including this section out here that'll tuck inside of the fascia. With everything tucked back in there, you'll grab the provided M6 button head and black washer. This you'll just need to line up with that clip nut now. You may have to reach in here and kind of manipulate that to get it started. But then with a 4mm hex, you should be able to just draw this in tight. And then you can repeat that process over on the other side. Now when it comes to actually making the cuts on the plastic, we just used tin snips or sheet metal shears, if you will, for most of that. A good sharp razor blade can help you out trimming some of this out as well. Nothing too crazy there, since this is just a plastic liner up here. With that finished up, the only thing you may really have left to do is power up your winch and tighten up the hook like we do here. You might still be routing up some wires for your light bar, and then of course don't forget to snap that cover back in under the hood to finish up your install. As always, if you guys have any questions at all about this product, this install, or anything else we offer here at Victory 4x4, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always send us an email at info@victory4x4.com or call us at 269-459-8447.